Hello and welcome to Forever Red Devils. This is your latest Manchester United news and updates, and the chaos continues in Manchester United, and a big sort of microscope currently on INEOS, especially after the week that we've had, and with the news that there is more redundancies set to take place at the club, and people set to lose the jobs. A very, very bad reaction towards it, and I think a general uneasiness really towards INEOS, with a lot of people now very nervous about what the future might hold in terms of our owners and the fact that they seem to be kind of moving away from sport, at least cutting sort of the funding they're putting into their sports teams amid a lot of cost cutting issues with what is currently happening with the company as well. So very worrying signs. Very good news though for South Africa, for Man United, is that they might be having a striker crisis solved by a certain individual who scored a hat trick last night, and very excited to see when it's going to start. We're going to start potentially seeing him as well, which is really, really good to see. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that INEOS has in a bit of a legal dispute now with New Zealand Rugby, for example, and the reason for it doesn't look good. So basically, what was announced earlier this week is that New Zealand Rugby are officially taking legal action against INEOS for breaching their sponsorship agreement. And basically, what's happening is that INEOS have signed a 6-year deal with New Zealand Rugby, and was supposed to be a very new, very sort of once in a lifetime sort of a groundbreaking sponsorship, for example. And they're supposed to be their performance partner from 2022 to 2027. And INEOS failed to pay their first installment of 2025, and which the New Zealand Rugby statement said, confirming its decision to exit our 6-year agreement. However, INEOS have hit back basically and said that it has contributed more than 30 million US dollars to the rugby teams in recent years. However, saying that, and this is from their statement, that citing the struggle in the chemical industry in Europe because of the high energy taxes and extreme carbon taxes, along with the deindustrialization of Europe, we have had to implement cost-saving measures across the business. Basically, they can't afford the sponsorship that they've signed up with now for New Zealand Rugby. What they're also, for example, what's happening is that they've pulled out of their sailing commitments. So they were sponsoring Ben INEOS and for the Britannica America's Cup, and they've apparently pulled out because they could not find agreement with it, and as a result, which means that they have now completely pulled that sort of a deal out. And the big thing as well is the fact that if you look at the cycling team, for example, INEOS Grenadiers, apparently they're just looking for a major sponsor to try and inject the cash needed to go into that team, to try and make them a super team once again. Basically, sort of showing that INEOS themselves are not going to be putting in the money to try and get that cycling team back to being what. So, we've now got a situation where the Manchester United owners have not paid a sponsorship amount towards New Zealand Rugby and are looking to try and reduce that sponsorship due to cost cutting. They're busy fighting with in terms of what their commitments are with sailing, and they seem to be not putting in a lot of money into the cycling team as well. This comes now after a weekend where they're talking about all the cost cutting they have to do at Manchester United to try and make it viable and free up funds. It's worrying signs for United fans, because it just seems like they just don't currently have surplus money to be able to invest into their different sporting commitments. And they've got a lot of sporting commitments. You look at Nice, for example, you look at their Formula One commitments as well. They're very much scattered across the different sports and lots of different clubs and in their portfolio. So it's worrying signs when any of them start to have issues and there seems to be a lack of funding, because if there's going to be cost cutting across the company, you're going to think there's going to be cost cutting across all different commitments. And when you look at United, you think about how much money is going to have to be committed to United in order to try and fix the issues, to fund the new stadium, to try and bring in the transfers that everyone needs, to try and build our women's team into, a women's Super League winning team, a Champions League winning team, to continue our youth system, to try and grow our scouting department. Big talks about the fact that apparently we haven't added any data scientists or any sort of data analysts and the likes of that in like 2 or 3 years in a very now data-driven world, and apparently are very hesitant to add into that because of the cost that it is going to bring. So it doesn't sound good. It really doesn't sound good in terms of the an owner who was supposed to sort of take us away from financial strife and to try and hopefully get rid of a lot of debt and eventually sort of buy the Glazers out and remove them. Because the biggest thing, as we said yesterday, is as long as the Glazers are still involved, we just know that there's going to be dividends being paid out, and the money that's going into the club is also going to go out the club and not being kept within the club to try and build the club to back to what it was. So it all seems to be a bit of a nightmare, to be perfectly honest, in terms of what a year ago we were all full of hope, of enthusiasm, of optimism in terms of new owners that were going to try and change things at United. And now we're sitting there going, did we make the right choice? Is this the right deal? And are we going to get the best of it? Because we were hoping that we were going to see a lot of money injected into the club where we could then sort of just start really focusing on the new things. And all that's happened so far really has been a lot of cost cutting at the expense of supporters, at the expense of staff, literally. A lot of redundancies being made and staff perks being scaled back. And apparently lots of different sort of small cost saving, which is, I suppose it all does mount up. But it's a worrying sign when you see a club like United trying to take any sort of shortcut to try and count the pennies. It doesn't paint a good picture. And yes, maybe the club was run maybe poorly in the past, where maybe we were far too frugal with what little money we officially, inverted commas, had, and we operated at far too much of a loss, and we had far too big expenses, and we need to try and sort of streamline that. That's one thing. But it doesn't paint a good picture when you've got your owners trying to sort of cut any cost possible whilst also seemingly pulling money out of their different sporting projects. Because you then wonder, well, if they're pulling the money out of that, it's not because they're going to be putting the money into United, it's because the money just isn't there to be able to fulfill the commitments that they've made. So it's all very well. So Jim Ratcliffe coming to, United is like his new toy, for example, and he's there in the stands every weekend, and he's the current project, and it's all very exciting. But, all the other ones are starting to be neglected, and you kind of wonder, well, how long until United becomes another thing that they look and go, actually this isn't working. And maybe they do then look to pull out of the deal, and we could potentially see new owners in the next few years. And this is the biggest problem, is United's almost too big. It really is too big. And there are only two sort of preferred bidders, obviously the Qatar bid, which didn't go through, which allegedly had the money and he wanted to pay off the debt to build the whole stadium and was apparently going to do it all himself, etc., etc. Lots of fans favoured that deal in terms of what it was. And I think there was a lot of hesitancy from the United point of view, especially for the British government, like that, a lot of pressure there for an external investor in terms of sort of these country type of backed things like the Man City situation, like the Newcastle Saudi funded situation. We're going to sort of be Qatar funded. So there's a lot of hesitancy and very much did not want that kind of deal to go through. Lots of people now saying that we would have been better off with the Qatari bid, and they would have seen a lot more money being injected in because they've got far more money to burn. Whereas INEOS is very much put in the money to buy the club, but we're not seeing them pouring bucks of money in to try and solve the issues like buying out the Glazers, like I don't know how just to fund the new stadium, for example. That's going to be very interesting to see how that's going to get funded and what that's going to affect us, in terms of our ability to acquire players, to sign players, to go after players, and the likes of that. So it's worrying times if you're United fan because the ownership has just not worked the way we wanted. We've not seen the results. We've not seen the commitment. We've not seen any sort of signs that things are really going to work well and that we're going to be able to get back to where we were and get back to our solid best. So that's very, very concerning. And unfortunately, the more that we struggle on the field, the more the pressure will grow on INEOS, the more pressure will grow on the owners, the manager, and the likes of that. And we can't really point to a single point within the club where we're seeing positives, where we're seeing things actually changing and for the better, and things are happening which can be celebrated. And that's the big problem, is that there's just very little in the club that currently is working. But something that is working, one of the few things, is our under-18s with the FA Cup Youth Cup. And they beat Chelsea 5. But the big story was the goal scorers. Chido Obi scoring a hat-trick, making it 15 goals so far this season. And since coming to United from Arsenal, we did basically throw a lot of money at him to tie him down. But we're seeing the rewards. 15 goals so far this season for the junior sides. And a hat-trick against Chelsea, who are the most successful. I think it's sort of tossed between us and Chelsea being the most successful in the FA Cup Youth Cup history. So the big thing is now we've actually booked a spot in the quarterfinals where we will be taking on Arsenal, which is Chido Obi's previous club, obviously. The big thing at the moment is when are we going to see him in the first team? We've got a youngster who's scoring 15 goals, and we've got strikers at the United senior side which are not scoring any goals. Now, yes, apparently United Chiefs and the likes that are trying to really sort of calm down the expectations and basically sort of talk about the fact that he's still learning, still not ready. But when you've got a player like that scoring goals for fun, and you pay good money for him as well, you suddenly start to wonder, well, he turns 18 this year. He's not, he's much younger than the likes of a Man Utd when they sort of came through. Could we yet see him in the first team? And surely he could do a job. I think we will see him before the end of the season. I think that, we're going to have to look at where he is and whether he can be part of the main squad next season, whether it's going to be more of a sending him on loan next season, for example, because that might influence the transfer market. If he's going to be a permanent part of the squad, then you suddenly think, okay, cool, well, then we need to still bring in a big striker, but maybe don't need to worry about having three, forwards. So we can, for example, if you replace Xerxes, you have Xerxes, Rasmussen, and Chido Obi Martin, then you're thinking, right, that three forwards are sorted. So that even if you have two injuries, for example, you've still got some of Chido Obi Martin before you have to start putting like a Manu leading the line or a Bruno Fernandes leading in the line. I don't think we really see that, but a guy naturally in the line and the likes of that. So I do think we will see him before the end of the season. I think especially in the league where we're not competing and there's nothing we can really do in the league. There's nothing we can really gain from the league. So I don't see in that perspective why we don't look at giving him opportunities. Because at the end of the day, you're never going to know whether he's ready until you give him a chance. And you have to be able to give him a chance to then determine that. And even if you literally play him and you all of a sudden decide, all right, cool, you can see he's good, but he's not quite ready to play at first team. If you can get him a couple of starts or a couple of games in the Premier League, then that should hopefully also open up more opportunities for loan deals. And maybe you can try and get him to a Premier League club or ideally a Championship club. I think that's sort of always the sort of ideal situation, a Championship club where you can play week in, week out, where you can get used to the physicality of this sort of level and senior level football. And, he'll come back to United as an 18-year-old, but about to turn 19. He'll go into, for example, next season, 2 seasons' time, where he'll be turning sort of 19. And at that age, again, maybe even two loads. But it's hard not to get excited about a kid who's scoring that is putting those kind of numbers. We spent money on him. We threw a lot of money in his profile, so we very much look at him as a future first-team player. He wasn't brought as a little bit of depth, for example, and maybe he might make it. He was brought in to be a United first-team player and to one day hopefully be a first-choice United player. And his numbers so far, he's got 5 goals and an assist in 6 under-18 Premier League games. He's got 4 goals in 2 games in the FA Youth Cup. So he's got 9. It's 9 games in for the United, but he had more goals I think before that as well for Arsenal so far this season as well. Even his numbers at Arsenal were 32 goals in 21 appearances with 3 assists as well. So his numbers are insane across all age group levels. So, and again, we'll only know where he is when he starts playing for the first year. Look, I think he'll probably start playing more football for the reserves. He's only played 2 Premier League 2 games so far. He's been mainly playing the under-18s. So hopefully he'll play a bit more in the reserves as well, because that'll also give a bit of an indication of where he is. And I do foresee us getting him a cap or official appearance before the season is up, because I think we need to see where he is and we need to start plotting his future, which will involve loans and the likes of that to try and bring him up to the first team level in a few years' time. In terms of transfers, nothing much really on the card so far. Unfortunately, no real update on Casemiro. Need to try and make sure we can try and push that loan through to Flamengo. He's, again, any sort of wages we can sell. And I think it made sense, given the fact that we are so desperate to try and cut the costs. We need to offload him and save those wages, get him out, save any sort of money we can. And then look to see what we can do in the summer in terms of selling on the right players, in terms of bringing in the right players. And the only sort of deal we have been linked in is we're currently talking about a possible move for Victor. I'll see him in the summer with Napoli apparently quite keen on Garnacho as well as Rasmus Højlund as potential parts of any sort of deal for Osimhen. He is one of the biggest, sort of most sought after strikers in Europe at the moment. So it's going to be a very interesting transfer window. I'll be surprised if we manage to get him, for example. I just don't feel confident that we've got it in us to be able to get that kind of deal in. The only way I think we'd probably be able to do it is if we were to put in a potential swap deal, throw in a Garnacho as part of the deal, but it would be Garnacho and money, or Rasmus Højlund and Garnacho, or Rasmus Højlund and money. So I don't really see how we get that deal over the line without us kind of losing money. I think that's the reality. I don't think we're going to be able to bring him in on the cheap. And, that's always going to be a problem because we spend big money all the time and we're not always sort of guaranteed the results. And yes, he's a phenomenal player. But right now, with the way we're playing, the way our strikers are just not getting opportunities enough in the box and the likes of that, you kind of just feel that putting in a striker right now doesn't immediately solve the issues. It's a far bigger problem than just lack of strikers and lack of quality up front. It's lack of quality from basically our defense upwards in terms of the transition and the way we're moving the ball and the way we're trying to create chances and getting balls into the box. And you look at how many shots we're taking and how many are outside the box versus inside the box, and it's very disproportionately outside the box. We're not just creating those opportunities for players inside the box, which is a massive issue. You got to look at how many goals Erling Haaland's going to score inside the box versus outside the box, and you look at the amount of touches our number 9s are currently having inside the box. It points to a really, really big problem, which is not going to be an easy fix at all. So let's get about to wrap it up for today. We'll be back live tomorrow morning, and make sure you join. And obviously, we'll have the Ruben Amorim press conference tomorrow afternoon as well. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you smash like on the video, subscribe as well, and we'll see you